superpower status is maintained by three really key pillars. First, transitioning from basic manufacturing to high-tech innovation. We shaped the planet. Over the last few decades, the global landscape has undergone what is easily one of the most profound economic shifts in human history, and that is the monumental rise of China. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how an isolated economy completely rewired global manufacturing, trade, and innovation. I mean, the contrast we're looking at is just stark. Prior to major economic reforms, China held a remarkably minimal share of global trade. It was a largely agrarian economy, pretty much isolated from international commercial currents. But fast forward to the modern era, and that quiet, inward-facing society has transformed into the absolute powerhouse of global industry. So, you have to ask yourself the crucial question: how exactly did this transformation happen in just a few decades? Because we aren't talking about centuries of gradual industrialization here. We're talking about a rapid, highly concentrated period of extreme economic acceleration. What specific levers were pulled to make this actually happen? Let's map it out. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Before the dragon woke. 2. The Great Economic Opening. 3. Factory to the world. 4. Entering the global market. And 5. A modern economic superpower.
Let's start with part 1, before the dragon woke, the agrarian era.
To really understand this, we have to set the baseline. Back in the 1950s, the economic reality was fundamentally an agrarian society. You had over 80% of the population engaged in traditional farming, and industrial output was incredibly low by global standards. Moving into the 1960s, economic momentum slowed down significantly, which led to a tough period defined by economic stagnation. By the 1970s, this pre-reform baseline was essentially an economy possessing massive human capital, but completely lacking the structural global integration to actually use it. Growth was moving at an absolute crawl, but a huge disruption was right around the corner.
Which brings us to part 2, the Great Economic Opening, a new catalyst.
So what was this economic opening all about? Well, it was a massive strategic shift towards global market integration and internal market-based reforms. From a purely economic standpoint, it meant pivoting away from a strictly closed, centrally planned system and very carefully introducing elements of market dynamics. It was all about finally allowing supply, demand, and foreign capital to actually play a role within a highly structured framework, just to spur modernization. And this shift wasn't chaotic. It was executed in highly pragmatic steps. First up, decentralizing agriculture. This gave farmers autonomy and immediately boosted yields. Second, opening the doors to foreign capital and technological expertise. And third, and this was a true catalyst, establishing special economic zones. Think about cities like Shenzhen. They were literally transformed from quiet border towns into these controlled free market laboratories that were designed from the ground up explicitly to attract foreign business and drive economic reform. The documented sentiment of the time captures this perfectly. It was a purely pragmatic shift towards modernization and economic development above all else. The mindset really pivoted to a completely practical approach to economics. It was the sudden realization that, look, integrating with global markets and embracing industrialization wasn't just an option. It was the absolute required path to raise the standard of living and build national wealth.
Okay, part 3, factory to the world, the manufacturing boom.
When this kicked off, manufacturing output didn't just grow, it exploded by a staggering 1,000%. The infrastructure, the massive labor force, and the capital all just aligned virtually overnight on a historical scale. It created an industrial machine with an unprecedented capacity. Now, in the 1980s, growth was relatively steady as those special economic zones gradually came online. But hit the 1990s, and the rising action gets really aggressive. Foreign companies were just pouring in to utilize that huge labor pool. Pushing into the 2000s, production levels completely dwarfed previous decades. It rapidly disrupted global trade, and honestly, it structurally lowered the cost of manufacturing for the entire world. And let's bring this home for a second. Think about why this matters to you right now. Your smartphone, your computer monitor, the coffee mug on your desk, maybe even the chair you're sitting in right now. These are, in all likelihood, the direct results of this massive shift. This boom fundamentally rewired the modern global supply chain. It literally shaped the availability and the price of almost every consumer good you touch on a daily basis. Let's look at part 4, entering the global market, integration, and acceleration.
The 1990s definitely saw massive steady export growth, but the real ultimate catalyst for the modern era happened in 2001, joining the World Trade Organization. This was huge. It fully integrated the nation into the rules-based global economic order and permanently lowered trade barriers for their exports. By the 2010s, that single integration event propelled them straight into an era of absolute global trade dominance. Get this. Once those trade barriers were lowered, they captured a massive 35% of the global export volume. 35%. There was simply no other nation capable of matching the sheer efficiency, speed, and scale of that manufacturing base to secure such an enormous piece of the global economic pie.
But it wasn't just about how much was exported. It was about what was being exported. They steadily climbed the value chain. What started out as heavily reliant on basic, simple goods, like textiles and cheap toys, rapidly evolved. Suddenly, we're talking about skyrocketing volumes of highly complex electronics and heavy machinery being shipped out to the entire world. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, a modern economic superpower, the new status quo. Today, this superpower status is maintained by three really key pillars. First, transitioning from basic manufacturing to high-tech innovation. We are talking about designing the next generation of artificial intelligence, telecommunications, and green energy. Second, unprecedented massive infrastructure development. Things like high-speed rail networks and smart cities that just keep that economic engine remarkably efficient. And third, maintaining a deeply entrenched central role in global supply chains. So, the punchline of this entire narrative, an $18 trillion GDP. 18 trillion. When you remember that disconnected agrarian society we started with just a few decades ago, this staggering economic output is the ultimate testament to the sheer power of economic reform, global integration, and massive industrial scale. But as global trade continues to evolve, with shifting demographics, changing geopolitics, and brand new technologies dropping every day, what exactly will the next chapter of this economic ascendance look like? Will that insane momentum hold? Will the focus shift entirely inward toward domestic consumption and high-tech dominance? The foundation has absolutely been laid, but the story is far from over. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and always keep questioning the data behind the world around you.